You know what I find funny? How everyone keeps telling me that the Tennessee Titans were the number 1 seed in the AFC last season, and yet those same people do not understand why the Tennessee Titans were the number 1 seed in the AFC last season. I'll give you a hint. It wasn't because of the offense. The Tennessee Titans defense is the most terrifying NFL defense that nobody is talking about entering 2022. I believe that the Tennessee Titans defense this season will be elite. It will surprise and it will dominate. So this is why you should stop underrating the Tennessee Titans defense in 2022. Let's talk about it. The Tennessee Titans defense in the playoffs, you may remember, sacked Joe Burrow. Not 6, not 7, not 8, but 9 times in the AFC divisional round. And I understand that the Titans disappointed last playoffs, but it wasn't because of the defense. They dominated, and it all starts up front with their defensive line. That is perhaps the most underrated pass rush in the NFL today. Jeffrey Simmons, in my opinion, is a top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL behind only Aaron Donald and Chris Jones. He is that good, he is that special, and he is extremely well-rounded. Not only can Jeffrey Simmons play the run, but he can also be a monstrous pass rusher, sacking Joe Burrow 3 times in a playoff game. He can take over a game. He single-handedly took over the game against the Rams on Sunday Night Football against the Super Bowl champs and destroyed Matthew Stafford's day. This is the type of player that they have in the interior. A monster among men. He was 5th in the NFL among all interior defensive linemen in pressures, and this guy had 11.5 sacks total last season, including the playoffs. He is that type of difference maker. Surrounding Simmons, you have really good football players like last year's breakout Harold Landry, who performed as we always thought he would coming out of Boston College as a pure pass rusher, had a huge season. I love his game, always have, probably always will. He's a perfect number 2 to Simmons' number 1. When he gets those one-on-one matchups, man, he can really feast because this guy is just a natural pass rusher from the edge. Denico Autry was a massive signing for this football team last year. And what I love about Denico Autry is his versatility. Not only can he perform from the edge, but he can also be a player that can move inside and pass rush from the interior. And this is incredibly important in a scheme under Mike Vrabel, because Mike Vrabel, of course, comes from New England. And in New England, under Bill Belichick, what does Belichick value? But he values versatility. Of course, the Tennessee Titans had Dean Pease. Now they have Shane Bowen, who also values similar things and similar traits to Dean Pease, having worked under him, as well as Romeo Crennel throughout his career, coming from Houston with Mike Vrabel, where they ran similar schemes to the Patriots back in the day. So having these type of versatile pieces, like Landry, who can stand up or get his hand in the dirt, like Simmons, who can play all over the defensive line, like Denico Autry, who is the biggest example of this, these type of players just thrive in this system, and I thought Shane Bowen did a phenomenal job at mixing up pressures, blitzes, stunts, and putting his players in the best position to succeed. I thought he elevated this defense through his schemes with understanding how awesome his front 4 can be, and then working his coverages off of that incredible front 4 that's going to create pressure by themselves. The Titans also have 2 nose tackles who shouldn't go overlooked against the run when you're talking about Jones and Tart. Both of these guys enter their 2nd and 3rd seasons and could break out as well. If we're talking about Landry broke out last year, Simmons broke out last year, well, Jones and Tart could be the guys that elevate their game. I'm not talking about being premier players at their position, but as role players, these guys could really help, and they were important against the run. The Titans were one of the top 3 teams in football last year against the run, and you would expect them to do the very same next season as well. When you're this good against the run and you have this much beef on the inside and you can stop the run the way that the Titans do, it sets up your defense for 3rd down situations where you can be very creative and Bowen is very good at putting his players in positions to succeed on these third down and difficult for offenses to get to the quarterback, to create pressure, to create turnovers, and force an offense to make mistakes. He just thrives in these scenarios, and so do the Titans pass rushers. Tennessee is hoping that Rashad Weaver, the young player who I believe missed last season as a rookie, can come into his own this year and provide that layer of depth off the edge. They also signed a really interesting player that I feel like has always been a little bit underrated, Demarcus Walker, formerly of the Denver Broncos. He was an offseason award winner for the Tennessee Titans, and all the vibes have been positive for him throughout camp and this offseason. They could also see him be a very nice rotation player, especially on the inside, to create a pass rush. I feel like this team and this defensive line is just loaded and is going to give a ton of offenses a ton of difficulties stopping them. I don't think I'd be doing the defensive line justice either if I didn't mention that Bud Dupree was coming off an ACL last year. This team signed Bud Dupree to be their primary edge pass rusher last year. And really, Harold Landry took advantage of Dupree missing some time. But when all four of these players, when we're talking about Autry, Simmons, Landry, Dupree, are in the mix as the front four, not only can this line stop the run effectively, but also in any given play, any four of these players can beat their offensive lineman and sack the quarterback and destroy a play single-handedly. Dupree hasn't always been known for his incredible pass rush savvy, but he is a great athlete. He's got very good speed and explosion. He's powerful. He sets the edge very well, and he's the perfect player to play inside this Bowen Vrabel defense. Don't forget about him. He could have a big year this year, and I wouldn't be that surprised, benefiting off of players like Simmons and Landry, as he did in Pittsburgh, benefiting off of Hayward and Watt. At the second level, the Tennessee Titans have arguably the most underrated duo of linebackers in the NFL, and they complement each other very, very well. David Long Jr. is a linebacker that I really like. I nearly put him in my top 20 linebackers in the NFL because of his versatility, because of his ability to stop the run, play in coverage where he's gotten a lot better, and then also just be savvy enough to flow sideline to sideline. This is a player that can play downhill, has the size and the ability, but also has the athleticism to drop back in coverage. So he's a very sound, well-rounded linebacker, and he benefits greatly from Cunningham. Zach Cunningham has been like the best run defending linebacker in the NFL. So Long is the do-it-all player, and Cunningham is the sledgehammer, downhill, classic, like Patriot-esque linebacker, like the Dante Hightowers, like the Teddy Bruschies who Mike Vrabel played with. This is his type of role. He's gonna smash a guard and a center in the face, and he can even be effective in the same fashion as a blitzer, which I would expect them to unlock this season. This guy plays downhill, he's physical, he's old school, and yes, he's not the greatest in coverage, but you benefit greatly in your run defense when this player is on the field. Speaking of fantastic duos that might be the best in the NFL, the safety duo for the Tennessee Titans is maybe the best in the NFL. I mean, I love the Bills duo, and they probably get it just for the length of time that they've been great and successful. The Titans are probably second here. I mean, we're talking about Amani Hooker, who's extremely underrated, perhaps the most underrated safety in football, who's great as a free safety in coverage and has great range and great just vision to see a quarterback, read his eyes, break on the football, and make plays. Kevin Baird is arguably the best safety in the NFL, and we've seen him play at a Pro Bowl level at strong safety or free safety, in the box or deep. He can cover tight ends. He can play as a robber zone defender. He can play deep. He can do anything you ask him to do. He can play downhill and play as a extra linebacker. Like, this guy can do so many different things. That's why I love Kevin Baird, and that's why I believe he's the best safety entering 2022. These two complement each other extremely well. Yes, they've lost some depth. Farley left, Cruikshank left, I get it, but their cornerback position is a position that's deeper this year and has a ton of upside. This is why I'm so high on the Titans defense. I love the front seven. I like the scheme. I think they do a lot of things really, really well. And like I mentioned, the linebackers are underrated. The safeties are the best there is. But the cornerbacks is where this defense could truly unlock to being maybe the best in the NFL. When we're talking about this cornerback group, we have Caleb Farley, who's coming back from injury this year. The cornerback that I ranked first in his draft class because I just loved and fell in love with his athleticism, his size, his speed combination, and his man-to-man coverage skills. If they can unlock that guy, this secondary could be special. We already know what Christian Fulton can do as one of the breakout corners from last year. Great in zone coverage, great on breaking on the ball, and does offer some versatility and some decent size, some decent speed, just a well-rounded corner overall, and did crack my top 20 corners in the NFL right at number 20. I feel like he's only getting better. We have Elijah Molden, who is that nickel back who's savvy, who's intelligent, who can blitz, who can cover, who can stop the run. He can do a lot of different things, and they use him in a creative fashion. And then we're talking about Roger McCreary, who's a little savvy, like Malcolm Butler-esque type of player, where he's kind of smaller, but he's quick, he's feisty, he's all over you, and he sticks to you like glue. And I think that's what they were looking for, like the replacement to what they used to have in that Malcolm Butler, like try to stick with in man-to-man the shifty little receivers. I feel like Roger McCreary is that type of guy, and he's a perfect corner 4 because he could start on probably a couple teams, but he has super upside to be able to come through and provide some nice depth in probably a variety of roles, whether it's outside or in the inside, although he played a majority of his snaps on the outside in college. They have all these guys, including Chris Jackson. There's a lot of depth here at cornerback. I think the Titans improved that greatly this offseason, and a ton of potential because all of these players are within their first 3 years of their career, I believe. The Tennessee Titans defense is not to be messed with. It's not to be underrated. It's not to be underestimated. This Tennessee Titans defense is the most terrifying defense that you are not talking about. So start talking about it.